Welcome back to the Oscar Project Podcast, the show where I discuss Oscar-nominated films year by year. I am your host, Jonathan Eacherberg, and today I'm bringing you an interview with Ida Melum and Jayne Tunbridge, director and writer of the short film Ovary-Acting. Before I jump into the interview, please be sure to subscribe to the show in your podcast player so you can get all the newest episodes as soon as they are released. If you like the interview and want to hear more, please consider leaving a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Ida Melum is a director working in stop-motion animation whose previous short, Night of the Living Dread, won an Annie Award and was nominated for a BAFTA. Jayne Tunbridge is a BAFTA-nominated writer whose layered and incisive scripts balance humor with heartfelt storytelling. The pair reunited to work on the new short, Ovary-Acting, which will premiere at Tribeca this June, and they join me on the podcast to talk about their new film. Ida and Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
So your film is a beautiful look at the roller coaster of emotions that a lot of women go through when deciding whether or not to have children, and it looks at that decision from just about every possible angle. What made you want to tackle this subject for this film?
This whole thing kind of sort of came about in my late 20s, I think. I just always sort of assumed I would want to have kids. And one day I was at this family event. I have a really big family. I have about 20 cousins, and they were all at this stage in life where they were starting to settle down and have kids of their own and start their own families. And it was quite obvious that I hadn't gotten to that point yet. And one of my uncles, he bluntly came up to me and he was just asking me like, "So when are you gonna have kids?" And it sort of just hit this spark in me. I was like, wait, do I want to have kids because I want to have them, or do I want to have kids because it's clearly sort of expected that I should have them? If not, I'm already a bit late. I should have had them already, sort of thing.
Right.
And I think that was just this initial spark for this topic. And then I got really curious about it. I started speaking to all my friends, male and female, and it just opened this sort of like can of worms. Like everybody had so many opinions and thoughts and stories, and it was just so interesting to talk about. And I think what we touch upon, even though it's definitely like this is something that goes for both men and women, it touches us all. But I think what was really poignant is that for women, especially, whether you want to have kids or not, because of biology, by the end of your 20s, you're sort of forced to have taken a stance or at least thought about what you want. Not having decided, but you're forced to think about it. And so everybody has something to say about it. And it just became so interesting. And yeah, and it turned out, even though I was having this confusion and wanting to figure out what was right for me, I was so not alone in it. And what was really great about this whole story and how this film came to be was how it became written. And it became written by obviously me and Laura, who had the initial ideas for this film. But our core team is based on this incredible group of women from different walks of life, different ages spanning from 25 to mid 40s, some who already have kids, some who don't want kids, some who are unsure, whose road to kids will look different. So I think that in itself became so important for this film. It just added so many different viewpoints and aspects to the story, which made us tell it, hopefully, in the best way we could possibly do. So, long answer, but I feel really passionate about it. So,
Yeah, just to add to what Ida was saying, I think the other thing we realized when we were talking more and more about this is generationally, it looks different for our generation than it did for our parents or the generation before us. I think, for us, it's not just do I want kids or do I not want kids? Can I afford to have kids? Do I have housing stability that allows me to have kids? Am I at a point in my career, or is my career stable enough to allow that to happen? And I think, it's not that these are new questions for our generation, but it does feel like generally we're all in a slightly more precarious place than our parents were. My mum, for example, had me at 24. I was barely formed at 24, and there's no way I could have had a kid at that point. I would never have been stable to do that. And I'm at 35 now, and I'm still not sure if I'm at that point where that's an option for me. And for me personally, I'm a queer woman, so there's another kind of layer of what does it look like if I want to have children? How do I go about that? What are the kind of hoops I have to jump through to go through that? So I think it was really exciting for all of us to kind of realize that we're all in some way, whether it's we want them, we don't want them, we're not sure, we're all thinking about it in different ways, while also trying to navigate this sense of expectation that's put on our shoulders, not just necessarily by family, but also by kind of the wider world, and kind of, these kind of almost these artificial milestones, like, you referenced earlier, Ida, right? That expectation of like, you should be thinking about it by now, or should have happened by now. Like, who decides that and why? So yeah, it was really fertile ground, excuse the pun, to kind of build the film from. Yeah, and it's been it's really just given us so much to work with in the development of the story and writing it.
Well, when I first watched the film, I found myself laughing out loud at some of the lines, especially Ovi, who's I think the funniest character, obviously in the film. But how did you go about balancing that humor from that character as well as some of the seriousness of the overall topic that you were trying to cover in the film?
It's really interesting. There were early versions of the script that I would show to my sister, and she was like, "Oh my god, this is you." And it's the weird side of me that, like, my family sees, but obviously it's not my professional side. And it was really fun to kind of have this character. It's in a lot of ways I've kind of mirrored Ovi on my inner child, right? The kind of the blue sky, everything's great, incredible optimist, like how awesome is everything? Because I think from a having kids perspective, in a lot of ways, you kind of do need to be an optimist, particularly kind of where we're at in the world and the challenges that come. We spoke about some of them earlier. That optimism, I think, is really, really important for all of us and to pass down to that next generation. So I think Ovi is kind of the extreme inner child. Everything is great, and we have to believe that everything's going to work out for the best. Which is super fun to write. And I think also you're absolutely right. Like, we're dealing with really quite serious topics and themes, but I don't think anyone. I think it's okay to explore these things while having fun. I think it's actually important to have fun while exploring serious things. I think life is funny. Life, in some of the hardest moments in life, you can find humor, you can find warmth. I think that's the beauty of being human, right? Is the nuance of all of us. And I think Obi really encapsulates that. And I think, for Eva, she's kind of the perfect challenge to overcome. You want someone that's incredibly enthusiastic, hugely enthusiastic about having kids, in order for Eva to really have to kind of confront that. So, and also within that balancing, making sure that we were being appropriate with the humor, and that it was never going too far. And I think we all were really mindful of, let's make sure that she is this lovable, fun character that we will have a great time watching. But also, are there moments where we need to dial it back? And I know that was a big part also, in performance as well, right, Ida, when you're animating and directing.
Completely. And I think just to sort of, because this is our second animation me and Laura worked on, and both of them sort of have the same recipe. We disguised as a comedy and then we punched them with the drama in the end. And I think what we figured out that really works for both of us is that as long as we know that the ending is landing in the film, that we're really delivering what we want to say with the film, and that's really punching through, then we are allowed to have fun with the rest. But I think we don't really want to do that too much before we are reassured that, oh no, the ending, what we're trying to say really sticks. Then we can have fun with the rest. Because if not, it just sort of distracts from what we want to say, doesn't it? So yeah. But yeah, everything you said, Laura, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic way of looking at it, making sure you stick the landing and then kind of play with the rest of it. Yeah, the film is so visually striking. You've got some beautiful handmade figures that you blend with what appear to be some very simple hand drawn or maybe even computer animated for some of the finer facial expressions. What goes into making some of these characters come to life in your film?
I was thinking about this question when I was just out walking my dog, actually. And I think it's what Laura just said initially about Ovi. I think I've learned so much through Laura about how to really give life to these characters, because if they don't have that on the page, I think it shows really well in the film that maybe they're a bit superficial. And so I think already then at the script point, we think about who they are, what makes them tick, what they like, what they dislike, all of this. And it's constantly in like being fine-tuned, and we're constantly trying to figure out who they are, because then I then work with a production designer, like, and it, because stop motion or any type of animation is so detail orientated. We decide everything, and in stop motion it's like almost at a freakish level. We decide like what is their skin made of, it's crazy. So we have all of these tiny details that we look at, and we build them bit by bit, and you want to have them in mind when doing it. And so from script level and working really closely, we had a lovely production designer, Sven Erik, and we chose our materials and what she would wear. And how she wore her hair, and all of this stuff. And so all the way from script to materials, and then we add the facial expressions. And in the end, it's actually me and my great collaborator, Rich Ferris, who also animated the stop motions with me. We act out the scenes. And so that's also really fun to act out the characters. But yeah, all the way through, we're working on them. We figure out like who they are and how we want to bring them to life, because I think it's so important. They are the story, especially for this film. Yeah. Does that answer the question at all?
Yeah, no, and I guess part of the question too was, just the physical things of actually physically making these characters too. Like what kind of goes into that part of it?
Completely. So I for our previous film, Night of the Living Dread, I spent a long time trying to find a style for the stop motion, and I ended up finding a style I really loved. We ended up using this like t-shirt material for the skin and felted wool for the hair, and so I just wanted to continue with that style. And then, as you touched upon as well, Jonathan, we did use 2D animation for the facial features, and it's just become like this mixed media thing that I really like. And I think it's because the stop motion has a tendency to be quite slow and has this specific look. I think the 2D makes it quite snappy and fun, which is what I really love. So I love this combination. So we went with that, and then we tried to push it further than we did in Night of the Living Dread, and have a lot of fun with it. And yeah, I guess it's become like this sort of like style, I guess you could call it. It's sort of what goes into the visual development, I think.
Well, and then in the middle of the film, you have what I would probably call one of the more ambitious sequences I've seen in a stop motion film, let alone a stop motion short. I think it absolutely works for what you're trying to do. And I don't know how much you want to give away for folks. Obviously, the film's premiering soon. But what were some
Yeah.
of the challenges in putting together that sequence in the middle of the film? I know you know the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Laura, I'm okay with calling it for what it is, or should we
Yeah,
be
I
more
am.
secretive?
I think
Yeah,
it's epic.
yeah. So there's a like, well, thank you, Jonathan. I'm happy you like it. There's a bit of a little musical number happening in the middle. I think visually it was a challenge. How do we introduce it? How do we create this new universe within our already very designed universe? And again, worked really closely with the production designer, and I think what our musical number composer Ali did so well is that it's one thing having a musical from the beginning to the end, but this was just like he had one number and it needed to work. It needed not to be alienating, and or put people off. I think that was the big risk. And I think he just musically nailed it. I think it's so catchy. I'm such a fan of the number myself. But my whole dream for the film was I just want it. So I think he has, I think the tune is like such a little earworm. It just sticks. And so my dream was always that the audience would not only enjoy it, but they would hum the tune when they left the cinema. So come the premiere, like fingers crossed, that's my big goal. But Laura, I think you should talk further about, the lyrics and how you and Ali work together, because obviously you had to work narratively as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, I think it's really important to acknowledge like the ambition of that is all Ida, right? Ida had this in mind from the beginning. It's one of the first things we talked about when we started developing the story. She was like, I want a musical number. We were like, okay, we'll find a way, we'll make it work. And I think, I think that ability to take risks and to push, like that's Ida through and through. That, I don't want to embarrass you, but it's true. It's that you have this visionary perspective, I think, as a director, which is incredible. And it's amazing to follow your lead on that, because I think your instincts are always right. And, she came in from day one saying, I know that I want this and I think this would be great for this film. And I think that's really exciting for all of us. I can say that from a writer who's there right from the beginning to kind of go, great, like we're pushing all of this to the limit and we're telling again what is, has really serious, thoughtful themes, and trying to find a really entertaining, engaging way to delve into that. So I think, from my point of view, that was really, really exciting. We kind of had, when we kind of got to work on musical number, it was almost like a second writing process. So we had, the script and the story very, very much nailed down. We did a lot of work on that for, a long time, couple of years, right, Ida? Like it was a lot of iterations.
Yeah.
We always had kind of placeholder, terrible lyrics that I'd written, just really bad. But it was more kind of the story points in the lyrics that we were trying to get across, and kind of this is emotionally what needs to happen for the characters in this moment. And then just the brilliant Ali came on board, and it became a second writing process. And, again, he's got this genius ability to create this very catchy, this very catchy song that, you know, all of us sing it all the time. I will wake up in the morning. My partner wakes up in the morning. She's heard it so many times singing this song, which is incredible, you know, and us getting to go back and forth with Ali kind of reworking the lyrics and trying to find that right balance of how does this work as a song and stand alone on its own as a song, but how does it also meet the story points we need to get to? And I think, you know, that just speaks so much to his, you know, incredible ability and skill as a lyricist, as a songwriter. And again, to make it work in the film, to kind of have that transition in and transition out without it feeling like a weird left turn. It was amazing, and I learned so much through that collaboration with Ali. And you know, we'd have our own, all of us as, you know, big group of our own separate song meetings, which, you know, was months of doing that, which was really fun. And you know, moments of us kind of spitballing lyrics and different things, and we were also reacting to the news as well, and you know, things like the cost of living crisis in the UK and things like that, and how's that impacting some of the lyrics that are coming through. It was really fun, and I think you can really tell that in the film how much fun we had in the creation of that moment.
Completely. And I think Ali sent, I think the song that we ended up using was like his second or third version draft. It was like the second draft was the melody that we ended up sticking to. And it's just, as Laura said, it's just been tons of iterations of the lyrics that we changed. But the melody, I think, was there from the second
Yeah.
version he sent. So yeah, it was really fun.
And it's kind of funny that this the episode that this interview is going to air comes close on the heels of a conversation I had with someone on the film The Broadway Melody from 1929, which was the second winner of the Best Picture at the Oscars. So it's classic Hollywood, you know, musical meets current short film animated stop motion musical.
Quite silly.
Yeah, interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah.
And then, of course, obviously, we haven't touched yet on the voice cast that bring all of these characters to life. I think the performances are really excellent. Tell me a little bit about the process of casting those roles, especially, obviously, the main characters for the film.
I think this is definitely a question for both of us, Laura. But again, it goes back to what I spoke about earlier when, you know, the team and Laura and I were constantly talking about who these characters are. And I think casting for me is always a bit of a challenge because it's one thing for them to live in your head, and then you need to find someone else to interpret those characters for you. But you feel so close to them. So, but we work for months, and we have all these ideas of people that we like and that we see in shows and films that we admire, and then we, as a team, just trying to think about these people. And I had seen both of the girls. I had seen both Suneva and Sophia in different shows, and I think the characters both had really different challenges. I think Suneva, who we went for with Eva, had to be really relatable, but have all these like facets to her as a woman, represent, weirdly enough, have to represent so many different women in one character sort of thing. And then for Ovi, who ended up being Sophia, she had to be just this all loving, charming, over the top character, but also not be completely, you know, she couldn't be too like annoying or rub people the wrong sort of way. And I don't know, Laura, do you want to, I can talk about the performance. Laura, do you want to add anything to about like how we ended up finding them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that kind of magic spark, right? Like we talked a lot. We had kind of, we brainstormed between all of us around like, you know, who could be a good fit for this. And I think I remember hearing kind of the rough takes for the first time from both of them, and it was just this magical like, yep, okay, we found it. Like the film works, right, and the characters work. And I think you're absolutely right. But I think particularly with Ovi, hitting that right challenge, that right balance, is a challenge of like lovable, fun, energetic, enthusiastic, but also not annoying and not tone deaf, right? And
Yeah,
you
yeah.
don't want her to come across as a character as just so on a, you know, in one track of what she wants that she's unable to connect with an audience. And I think, you know,
Yeah.
Sophia did that incredibly well. And with Snerva, I think, you know, again, I think you said it so well, Ida, like what she's done with Eva, she's made this every woman character in this really exciting way that I think we can empathize with, we can laugh with, we can feel frustrated with. She's our Lincoln, Eva is our Lincoln. I think Snerva did such a beautiful job with that. But you know, you're creating everything in stop motion, right? Like every element of sound, whether it is our voice actors or the composition or the sound design itself, like you're building a world, and all of those elements have to fit together so precisely. I think, Ida's done an incredible job of helming the ship, of making sure all those elements work just so.
It was thank you, Laura. It was really fun. It's so nerve-wracking that day in the recording studio because it's like, this is it, we're doing it. But honestly, like I remember reading this question today and I was thinking back to how I felt on those days, and it was just so joyous. They work their butts off, literally. We were there 8 hours plus, and I remember because there was so much they needed to get through. Not only did they have to get through the script, they were also then at the end of the day singing a musical number. Like there was so much for them to get through, and they just gave everything. And I remember Sophia as well, who has the most unhinged character, Ovi. She did not leave anything behind. She gave us everything, and literally, I remember sitting with our editor Leslie Pozzo after these days of recording and just having the biggest issue was literally choosing the take. We had such an issue because they'd given us so much to work with. It was mad. And so then became our biggest issue, like which one of these 13 takes do we go for? But yeah, it was really, really fun. And it's lovely hearing it all come to life in a new sort of way after having had your own voice in it in the storyboards. And it was lovely. It was genuinely lovely.
That's really awesome. Well, I have a couple of questions not specifically related to the film, but before I move on, is there anything else you want to touch on about Overreacting?
Not really. I think, I think it's just, I hope people really enjoy it and they see what we're trying to do, bring up the serious topic, but in a fun and entertaining way, but that there's so much love and authenticity behind it.
Yeah, I think we've been so lucky with this team. And I think what's really lovely, and I think you see it in the film, you see the fun that we had together. But I think what's been incredible is we've balanced all of that with like what is a really important and heartfelt message from all of us. And yeah, I just hope audiences enjoy watching it as much as we enjoyed making it.
Well, this might be the hardest question I ask all day, but if you had to pick your top 3 films of all time, what would they be?
It is honestly like
so hot.
All right, I'll try. I think top films is going to have to be Forrest Gump, Almost Famous, and Emperor's New Groove. Is that what it's called in England? Yeah, I think those are the films that had the most impact on me throughout my life, to be honest. Yeah, so those are my top 3.
That's a great combo. That's a really great combo. Mine, similar to yours, mine are kind of ones that I think are amazing films, but also ones that bring me a lot of joy.
Yeah.
So my 3 are Booksmart, Olivia Wilde's film.
Nice.
Portrait of a Lady on Fire, Celine Sciamma. And my third thing was actually my granddad's favourite film, but it's also one of my favourite films. It's A Matter of Life and Death by Powell and Pressburger. Just beautiful, timeless classic.
Now, if you could invite any 3 movie characters to your next dinner party, who would they be and why?
Well, I clearly live in a world of animation because I can only think of animated characters. But I think also we spoke about this, Laura and I. My life is quite chaotic, so I went for like chaoticness. I was thinking like, I don't know, Isma, Stitch, and I don't know, Elbow. Like they would be a great combo. I think I was just like looking for what could be the most chaotic, weird combination of characters, and that's what I went for. So something like that I think would be very entertaining, very chaotic, but very entertaining.
For sure.
Yeah, our brains are very similar. I've also gone for pure chaos. I think I would invite Beetlejuice just to see what happens, really. Winifred Sanderson from Hocus Pocus, again, because who doesn't like a bit of danger at a dinner party? And Madeline Ashton from Death Becomes Her, just like the most iconic character ever.
Nice.
Definitely some chaos at some of those parties.
Yeah.
And do you have any books that you could recommend that you've read recently? They could be fiction or nonfiction and don't have to be related to movies.
Laura, do you want to go first?
Sure, yeah. I am currently reading Overspill by Charlotte Paradise. It's her debut novel, and I'm loving it. It's really great.
Nice. I feel terrible. I'm not the best at reading books, but I'm a big podcast listener, and one of my favorite ones that I always recommend to everybody is Radiolab. I don't even know, are they like science, psychology, history? But it doesn't matter what they tell their story about. I think they're just, every episode to me is a bit of a masterclass in storytelling overall. Like, it is incredible how they tell their subjects and how they tell their stories. And also their use of sound design is just incredible. But I cannot recommend that podcast enough, to be honest.
Excellent. Well, we'll put some links to those so people can check them out. And who else from the world of film should I have on the podcast as a guest?
Actually, Laura and I spoke about this. We think you should bring on our good friend Antonin Nicholas. He is a close friend of mine. He actually, the year that we were nominated for the BAFTA with Night of the Living Dead, he was also nominated and he won. And that was so lovely because we were actually going to school together, and we were also living together when we were making our films. So all of these teams going to the BAFTAs together and one of us winning was just incredible. And he is now busy making his next short film. I think he's just about to go into production, and he's a wonderful filmmaker and a wonderful person. So we thought, we would recommend you bring on Antonin.
Definitely.
Perfect. Well, we'll see if we can get a hold of him and have him on in the future. And lastly, before we wrap up, do you have any other projects lined up? Obviously, I know the premiere is just coming up for this film, but anything that you're working on? And also, where can people follow you on social media to keep tabs on your work?
I have a few things in the works. I think with writing, it's always that kind of very long development pipeline. So who knows when I'll be able to announce things. But you can find me online at Laura Tunbridge.
I am also have some early development going on at the moment, but I also will see when I can sort of announce things. But yeah, I put my work out on Instagram and also at idamelum.com. So there's both the website and Instagram. You can check that out.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for the time today. Really appreciated sharing your film with me and getting to see that, and also hearing about what went into the making of the film.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you again to my guests today, Ida Melum and Laura Jayne Tunbridge. Their film, Ovary-Acting, is set to have its premiere on June 7th at Tribeca, with additional showings on June 14th and 15th. The Oscar Project podcast is written and produced by me, Jonathan Eaterberg, with editing assistance from Joshua Eaterberg. If you want more movie coverage, check out the Oscar Project online at theoscarproject.substack.com, and I'll be back on Friday with Jonathan Hammond to discuss the 1929 film Weary River, and next Tuesday I'll have an interview with Aaron Blaise, director of the short film Snow Bear. Until then, I hope to see you at the movies.